Good morrow, scholars. Welcome to Vampire Survival number 1. Or I guess Vampire Survival 101. Yeah, that sounds good. I like that. And then we'll turn this into an ongoing thing if I feel like it. So sorry if you don't want to see it, but hey, I'm actually having fun. I liked the zombie thing. I figure vampires would be good for right now just because I'm reading Twilight and I'm doing all the stuff for Twilight. Let's see. Next up, let me know if you want to see werewolves, ghouls, let's see, the differences between vampires, ghouls, and revenants. That'd be a fun video to do. Let's see. Something in the ocean. Ooh. Oh man, I can't believe I didn't think about this sooner. Let me know if you guys want to see videos on different mythological horrors from around the world. Like, for instance, there's this Welsh spirit. It's got like the body of a horse, and it leads you to water, and drowns you. That took a little bit of a turn. Anyway. So, there's a book. It's called The Vampire Survival Guide: How to Fight and Win Against the Undead. It's by the author. The author is named Scott Bowen. It's a really good read. It's very compact. It was only about that big. Yeah, about there. Good read, quick read, high rereading value, if you ask me. I gave it to my friend Miga in regards to the previous video with him writing a Twilight video, or a book. Well, reverse Twilight, I don't know. I went over that already. Anyway, so I thought it'd be kind of cool, since I did the Zombie Survival Week, I'd do something for vampires. So first and foremost, you've got to, let's say vampires exist, and you want to know what you're up against. There are different types of vampires, and a lot of people don't realize that, especially nowadays, because Twilight caught on so well. Most people, when they think vampires, they think of that. A lot of people think Dracula. That's a different kind of vampire altogether. Some people, if you're like me, but for movies, specifically horror movies, which I don't usually watch, except for Halloween and the month therein, you think Nosferatu, perhaps, when you think of vampire. And each one of them is way different from not only each other, but the original story of the vampire that came about in the first place. For instance, not one of the main complaints, but a complaint I had when Bella is researching vampire lore, a lot of it is your average moviegoer knowledge of vampires. You know, stake to the heart, whatchamacallit, the whole sensitivity, there we go, to sunlight, aversion to garlic, you know, stuff like that. And I remembered, because, you know, she made no secret, she didn't do any research in regards to vampire lore, because she wanted to create all this new stuff for her book. And at that point, why call it vampires? Or I guess, why call them vampires? If anything... Oh, that would be good. If anything, her characters have more in common with a creature known as the Golem. Or a Golem. And that's not the Pokemon, by the way. But this is where it gets its name. The Golem is an old Hebrew story about a rabbi who breathes life into a clay statue and gives it life. Well, it gives it a purpose. I just said he breathes life into it. To defend the village from invaders or their enemies. And that story, if she had done something closer to that, and rather than saying they're vampires, I think it might have been a little less hate-filled when it comes to the antis, or the antis, however you would prefer to say it. So, like I said, you gotta realize what kind of vampires you're facing. If it's something like Dracula, Like I mentioned in a prior video, Dracula spent most of his time running away from his human pursuers. Even though he had all these powers, he had flight, he could shapeshift, he could hypnotize people, he could control the weather, he could do all sorts of things, and he still felt the need to run away from mortal humans because he knew that they would be able to kill him, even with all his tremendous ability. That's one of the things I like about vampires, is the need for the masquerade, if you would. It's a TV tropes term. It refers to pretty much there being a veil, if you would, over the whole of humanity, so that they don't know that they don't know that the supernatural exists. Funny thing, Supernatural. It's a good show. Let me know if you guys would like to see some videos on Supernatural. I'd love to do a compare contrast of certain seasons that I thought were strong versus ones that were weak. Maybe we'll do something like that in the next video. Who knows? Anyway, back to vampires. If you're facing against a vampire such as Dracula, you gotta be quick, you've gotta be smart. Because that's way too many powers for, you know, the average human being, a couch potato, to deal with. He's got super strength, super speed. If you guys didn't go see Dracula Untold, that one actually was really good. It stayed mostly true to vampire lore and the lore of Dracula in regards to the book, as well as the historical Vlad the Impaler, from which Dracula was somewhat based off of. Now then, originally, and this will be the easiest type of vampire to go up against, especially for your average man or female. I thought Frida was in here, she's not. In regards to this type of vampire, the original one, it's more in line with what you would refer to as a zombie. In fact, I think I mentioned this in the Zombie Survival Week videos. Originally, the vampire was a human being who died under certain circumstances, and their body was mishandled in the burial, or wasn't buried at all, and it comes back for revenge on its family. And what it does is it rises from its grave, shambles, and drains the blood of any living family members. And it will travel great distances and wait a long time before it's finished. And once it's killed every single member of the family, it will finally be put to rest, so to speak. Or if the family members who survive were to rectify the situation and give it a proper burial and go through all the necessary channels that one would when trying to appease the afterlife, the killings would stop. There was one famous story, I believe I believe it was in the United States. I can't remember where. I can't believe I've forgotten. But there was a family who was suffering from these problems. All of these family members were dying. They were, I think they were anemic. And what had happened, supposedly, is one of the daughters fell ill, was improperly handled and improperly buried, and she had put a curse upon the family, and she was draining them of their life force, causing them to die. And I believe it was her brother. He took her body. Well, he didn't take her body, but they had her body, and they burnt it, and they used all sorts of like potions and brews and whatnot. Not brewskis. And he got the ashes, or the cremains rather, and put them in another potion, mixed it up, and drank it. Now, this didn't save his life. He still ended up dying, but he was the last member of the family to die under these circumstances. Pretty interesting. I'm sure it was all, for the most part, in their heads, and they were making themselves die because of superstition and whatnot. But it's still pretty interesting. I think if I were to make a vampire movie, I would do one about this, because it would be less like a horror or gore type of a movie. It'd be more a psychological thriller, as well as maybe magic, maybe mundane type of a thing. A TV tropes term that describes a situation that could be magical in nature, but it could also be explained away using real life, if you would prefer. It's up in the air. It's really up to the viewer's choice, I guess you could say. Not the awards, though. Another type of vampire that you could possibly go up against is the Jiangshi, I think. I've never really been too sure on how exactly to pronounce it, but this one is a Chinese vampire, and it works much the same way that the American or European version does. However, this one doesn't drink blood. It takes your life energy, or qi. And the more qi it drains from a person, the stronger it gets, and the more dead, like, the person becomes that, is being drained. And once all of their qi is drained, they turn into a servant of the Jiangshi. Not unlike how Dracula would turn what's-his-face into his manservant. You know who I'm talking about. Why can't I think of his name? Renfield. He fell asleep too soon. Anywho, if you guys remember the episode of the Jackie Chan Adventures on the Kids WB back in the day, that was fairly accurate for the most part. However, they gave the Jiangshi, or Chinese vampire, more powers in line with Dracula and American vampire lore, that is to say the movies, than it had in common with the actual Chinese myth. For instance, being able to fly, hypnotism, I think, was another one. Stuff like that. And if I remember correctly, they had to take a talisman of some kind, not the talismans that they used, but put it in its left sock and toss it into the river. I can't remember. I'm going to go back and watch that episode now, actually, because it was really good. Another thing that most stories will agree on is vampires. Oh, I can't believe I didn't think about this one. If you guys ever read Cirque du Freak, let me know. If you haven't, it's a great story and stuff. But most vampire lore, mythology, and movies agree that vampires can't cross running water. And Cirque du Freak, the saga of Darren Shan, offered a few explanations for this. And the vampires, not wanting to risk anything, like there was a trial at some point where this tunnel filled with water, but it was perfectly still, because they believe the whole, if you die in a river, your soul is trapped. And since vampires are vampires, they didn't want to risk it. So the whole point of it was even vampires can be trapped in these things, even if they don't technically have a soul, depending on which version, the version you're discussing. If they're just the animated corpses, it's nothing but it's a physical ghost, is the best way I can describe it. And you've got other vampires, like, say, from Twilight, the saga of Darren Shan. You've got the one movie with Craig Ferguson. That's who I'm thinking of. I don't know what's wrong with me. It was called The Revenant. And they're your just fairly typical Hollywood vampires. And I dislike the Hollywood vampire a great deal. I mean, I understand wanting to have, like, physically attractive predators, but I'm a much bigger fan of, say, The Strain by Guillermo del Toro. His idea of vampire is much more how would you say, entertaining. Number one, because it's horrifying. Number two is he makes no qualms about what they are. They are monsters. They are evil. They are out to kill you and everything you love. Twilight wasn't really any of that, and that's perfectly fine. You know, no two stories need to be the same if they have, you know, similarities. I understand that. But I feel like Twilight went too far in one direction, and then the editor tried to, you know, like bring her back over, and by that point it was too late. I mean, if either story were told on its own, I think it would have been a better one. However, I guess if Twilight didn't have the vampire aspect to it, that it wouldn't have caught on as much as it had. I mean, because of Twilight, it single-handedly, if I remember correctly, gave rise to the new genre, the paranormal teen romance. What in the world? I don't know if that was a TV or not. Anyway, I think that's about it for this episode, because, no, I'm not Superman. Since I'm a huge Batman fan, my boss at work, he complains about my hair when it gets long because I get the S little swirl in my hair. Anyway, I think that's about it. You know, if you guys have any ideas on other vampires, I'd love to go over them with you guys. Let me know down in the comments. Vampires used to be one of my favorite monsters. And, ooh, we should go over Frankenstein's monster, because Mary Shelley based him off of the Golem, like I mentioned before, with Twilight. And it's actually a really good read if you can, like, I don't want to say force yourself to read it, but it's a good read if difficult. You know what I mean? You know what I mean. So give it a try, and like I said, let me know if you can think of any other types of vampires from around the world. I know I only went over like 3 different kinds. But yeah, any myths around the world you would like to see me discuss or research, and we can research this stuff together, that'd be fun. But I say but a lot. I don't know why. Iggy, what are you doing? Anywho, until next time. Goodbye, everybody.